It was one of those warm, peaceful afternoons that seemed almost too perfect. Birds were singing softly, the sun was shining gently through the trees, and a light breeze moved through the backyard of a small house in a quiet neighborhood. Little Julia, only 6 years old, was giggling as she chased Bubbles in the grass, her brown curls bouncing with every step. Her father, Mark, sat nearby on a wooden bench, watching her with a tired but content smile. He had just come back from a long shift at the fire station and was enjoying the precious little time he got to spend with his daughter. Inside the house, Elena, Julia's mother, was preparing lunch. She moved around the kitchen, humming a tune, feeling happy seeing her family together, peaceful. Everything about that day felt calm, as if nothing bad could ever happen. Julia was her world. She was bright, curious, always asking questions, always running after butterflies, or collecting colorful leaves in a tiny box she called her treasure chest. Julia ran up to her father, holding a big dandelion puff in her hand. "Daddy, make a wish," she said, holding it up to him. Mark leaned forward and blew gently. The tiny white seeds flew up into the air like fairy dust, making Julia laugh with joy. She hugged him tightly. "I wished for ice cream," she whispered. In his ear, "I wish we could have ice cream every day," Mark said, smiling. He kissed her on the forehead, then checked his buzzing phone. It was a call from the station. "Just a minute, sweetheart," he said as he got up. "Daddy needs to take this." Julia nodded and turned back to her game, chasing another bubble. Mark stepped inside the house, thinking it would just take a moment. Elena looked up as he walked in. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just something about the schedule," Mark replied. He answered the call and walked down the hallway toward the study so he could hear better. Less than 2 minutes passed. When he came back outside, something felt wrong. He looked at the spot where Julia had been playing just a moment ago. The bubbles floated gently in the air, but she was not there. "Julia?" he called, his voice still calm. No answer. He stepped down the wooden steps and walked onto the grass. "Julia, honey, where are you?" He checked behind the tree where she often played hide and seek. Nothing. The toy box near the fence. Empty. He jogged to the corner of the yard, his voice a little louder now. "Elena!" he shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Elena came rushing outside, wiping her hands on a towel. "What happened?" "She was just here. She was right here. And now she's gone." They both searched every inch of the backyard, calling out her name again and again. Maybe she had wandered around to the front. Maybe she went to the neighbor's yard. Maybe she was playing a trick. But no matter where they looked, Julia was not there. The police were called within minutes. Officers arrived quickly. The entire neighborhood came out to help. People formed groups and began searching in all directions. The wooded area behind. The house was checked thoroughly. Dogs were brought in to trace her scent. Drones flew overhead. Every camera in nearby streets was checked, but nothing made sense. There were no signs of struggle, no broken branches, no torn clothes, not even a single scream had been heard. One moment she was there, and the next, gone. As the day turned to night, floodlights lit up the backyard. People whispered in groups. Reporters showed up, standing behind police tape, talking into microphones. Mark sat on the ground holding Julia's doll. His face was pale and his hands were shaking. Elena refused to sit. She walked back and forth, talking to the officers again and again, repeating the same details. She was wearing a yellow dress. She had a red bracelet. She never talked to strangers. Her voice cracked each time. The police did not want to admit it, but the case was strange. Too clean. Too quiet. No evidence to follow. No car seen leaving. No one reported seeing anything suspicious. Julia had vanished in broad daylight from her own backyard, with her father just a few steps away. For the next few days, the town was turned upside down. Every house in the neighborhood was searched. Rivers, lakes, sewers. Nothing was left unchecked. Helicopters scanned miles of forest. Amber alerts were sent out. Posters with Julia's picture were everywhere, her smiling face with the words "missing" in bold red letters. People started talking. Rumors spread. Some began to suspect Mark. Why had he gone inside? Why didn't he see anything? Was it possible he was hiding something? The pressure mounted. Police questioned him for hours. They searched the house, his phone, his car, even his locker at the fire station. But they found nothing, not a single clue that could connect him to the disappearance. Mark stopped talking to people. He looked hollow. He stopped eating. Barely. Slept. The guilt of taking that phone call haunted him every second. If I hadn't gone inside, if I'd stayed just one more minute. Elena, too, began to withdraw. Her heart refused to believe that Julia was gone forever. She kept her room exactly the same, toys untouched, clothes folded neatly, drawings pinned to the wall. Every day she lit a candle and whispered her daughter's name. As the weeks passed, the search grew weaker. Volunteers stopped showing up. Police moved on to newer cases. Reporters packed up their vans and left. The town slowly returned to normal, but nothing would ever be normal for Mark and Elena again. Their relationship, once full of laughter and late-night stories, started to fall apart. The grief was too big, and they were drowning in it. Mark blamed himself. Elena blamed herself. They tried therapy. They tried silence. Nothing worked. Eventually, Mark packed a bag and left. He moved to another state, hoping distance would help him breathe again. But it didn't. Elena stayed. She couldn't leave the house. She believed, deep inside, that if she left, Julia would somehow return and find no one waiting. So she stayed. She walked the backyard every morning, touching the old swing set, the small wooden playhouse, the tree Julia loved to climb. She looked for signs. She waited for dreams. She talked to the wind. Over time, people forgot about Julia. A new missing case, a new news story took its place. But Elena never forgot. She didn't care what people said. In her heart, she still felt Julia's presence, like a soft breath on her skin, like a whisper in the dark. On what would have been Julia's 14th birthday, Elena baked a small cake. She placed it in the center of the table and lit a candle. She sat in silence for an hour, staring at the flame. Then she stood up and walked to the backyard. The grass had grown wild in some places. The old shed was leaning a little now, one of its doors hanging loose. The garden was full of weeds. Elena looked around and felt a sudden urge to change it. Not to erase the past, but to bring something new. A fresh start. That night, she made a decision. She would hire someone to renovate the backyard. Maybe plant flowers. Maybe rebuild the swing. Maybe, just maybe, it would help her heal. She didn't know then that the ground beneath her feet was holding a secret that had waited in silence for 8 long years, a secret that would change everything. After Julia disappeared, the house felt empty in a way that was hard to describe. The silence was heavy, pressing down on Elena's chest every moment of every day. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, but Julia did not come back. Elena and Mark tried to live as if everything was normal, but they both knew their lives were broken in ways that could never be fixed. The bright laughter that once filled their home was replaced by quiet whispers and long pauses. Elena found herself walking through the house many times a day, running her fingers over Julia's toys, looking at the pictures on the walls, and listening for any sound that might be her daughter's footsteps. At night, she dreamed of Julia. Sometimes Julia was calling for her, whispering, "Mom, come find me." Sometimes she was lost in the dark woods, scared and alone. These dreams made Elena wake up with tears on her cheeks, her heart pounding, so hard it felt like it might break. Mark, on the other hand, was struggling with a different kind of pain. He blamed himself for what happened. Every day he thought about those few minutes when he left Julia alone in the backyard to answer the phone. If only I hadn't gone inside, maybe I could have protected her, he told himself again and again. He stopped answering calls, stopped going to work regularly, and stopped speaking to anyone but Elena. But even their conversations grew shorter and colder. The couple began to drift apart. They stopped sharing their feelings. Instead of supporting each other, they became distant, each locked inside their own sorrow. Friends and family tried to help, but it was like Elena and Mark were living in two different worlds, both filled with pain, but unable to reach each other. One day, Mark told Elena that he needed to leave. He needed space to heal, or at least to stop feeling the weight of guilt crushing him every second. Elena didn't want him to go, but she knew the marriage was slipping away. When Mark packed his bags and moved to another state, Elena stayed behind. The house still felt like Julia was there. In the walls, in the rooms, in the backyard where she last played. Elena's world became smaller and smaller. She stopped going out. She stopped answering the phone. She spent hours every day searching the internet for clues about missing children, hoping to find even the smallest hint about Julia. She joined online forums where parents shared stories, offered help, or simply tried to stay hopeful. Some people called her brave. Others said she was lost in her pain. But Elena didn't care what others thought. She needed to find Julia. She needed to believe her daughter was still alive somewhere. Her neighbors noticed the change in her. The cheerful mother who once waved and smiled now rarely left her house. When Elena did step outside, she moved slowly, her eyes looking everywhere and nowhere at once. People whispered behind closed doors, some offering kind words, others simply shaking their heads, but no one could reach Elena. She was a mother holding on to hope in the darkest place. As the years passed, Elena became obsessed with the backyard where Julia had vanished. She felt drawn to it in a way she couldn't explain. Sometimes, late, at night, she would go outside and touch the cold ground, feeling as if it could tell her secrets. She believed that somewhere beneath the earth, Julia's story was waiting to be found. Her dreams became more vivid and strange. She dreamed of Julia buried under the garden, trapped and scared. These dreams were so real that Elena sometimes woke up screaming. She began to wonder if there was something she had missed, something hidden in the backyard that the police hadn't found. Friends tried to convince her to move on, to sell the house, to start fresh somewhere new. But Elena refused. "This is where Julia was last seen," she would say. "If I leave, I'll never know what really happened." So she stayed, living day by day in a house that held memories and mysteries. 8 years after Julia disappeared, Elena decided to make a change. The backyard had grown wild and overgrown. The flowers had died, the grass was patchy, and the old wooden shed was falling apart. Elena wanted to fix it, to bring life back to the place where her daughter had last played. She called a local landscaping company and explained what she wanted. It was a small step, but for Elena, it felt like hope. As the workers began clearing weeds and digging the earth, Elena watched closely, her heart filled with a mixture of fear and hope. She wondered if this simple act of cleaning the yard might bring answers, or maybe even Julia home. One day, as the workers dug near the old shed, they hit something hard buried beneath the soil. At first they thought it was just an old crate or a forgotten box. But when they pulled it out, it was heavy and sealed tightly. The nails were rusty, and the wood was worn but still strong. It was clear that someone had hidden this carefully, hoping it would never be found. Elena's heart raced. She insisted on opening it herself. Slowly she pulled the rusty nails and lifted the lid. Inside she found a small blanket, worn but clean, a decayed doll missing one eye, and most shocking of all, a pair of children's shoes and clothes that had belonged to Julia. Her breath caught in her throat. Tears filled her eyes. She touched The soft fabric smelling the faint scent of something familiar, something long lost. How could these things be here, buried under her own backyard? How had no one found them before? She called the police immediately. Officers arrived quickly, their faces serious. They cordoned off the area and began a careful investigation. Forensic experts examined the items, confirming they had been buried for many years, likely since the day Julia disappeared. The news spread quickly. Reporters returned, cameras appeared again, and the community that had once forgotten Julia was suddenly reminded. The police reopened the case with new energy, reviewing old evidence and searching for clues that might explain this shocking discovery. Elena felt a mixture of hope and fear. She hoped this meant Julia was alive, or at least that the mystery was finally closer to being solved. But she was also terrified. What if the worst was true? What if Julia had been buried there and no one had known? The days that followed were filled with interviews, meetings with detectives, and long nights of sleepless waiting. Elena refused to leave the backyard, watching as it became a crime scene, as experts carefully searched every inch. In the quiet moments, Elena remembered the dreams that had haunted her for years. Maybe they had been warnings or messages she needed to listen to. Maybe the answers had been under her feet all along. Even though she did not yet know the full truth, Elena felt something change inside her. A flicker of strength, a spark of hope that had almost died but was now growing again. After 8 long years of silence and pain, something had finally been found. Something that might bring her daughter home. After the shocking discovery in the backyard, the entire town was filled with a mix of hope and fear. Elena felt like she was living in a dream, or maybe a nightmare. The small wooden crate buried under the old shed was proof that something had been hidden from the world for all these years. But the question that burned in everyone's minds was, what exactly did it mean? The police returned with more experts. They carefully photographed every item, dusted them for fingerprints, and tested the fabric for clues. The children's shoes and clothes were old but recognizable, the same ones Julia had worn on the day she disappeared. The doll, though missing an eye, was familiar to Elena. It was Julia's favorite toy. The blanket was soft and faded but held a faint scent of lavender, something Elena had often used to calm her daughter at bedtime. Despite this, no human remains were found inside the crate or nearby. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Had Julia been there once but somehow escaped? Or had someone else been involved? Why was the crate buried in the backyard? And who had put it there? Elena watched the police closely as they reopened every detail of the case. Old reports were pulled out of dusty files. Witnesses were called back to question. Every clue was re-examined with new eyes, looking for things missed before. One day, a new detective was assigned to the case. A calm, focused woman named Detective Sarah Mills. She spent hours poring over the old police reports and evidence, determined to find the truth. Unlike others who had given up or treated the case as just another cold file, Sarah felt a personal connection. She knew how important it was to bring justice for Julia and peace for her family. Sarah's first breakthrough came when she reviewed surveillance footage from a nearby traffic camera. This camera had not been carefully checked in the original investigation because it was located farther away, and no one thought it could help. But Sarah noticed something unusual. A van had been captured leaving the neighborhood on the day Julia disappeared. A large dark van moving slowly down the street. And, incredibly, it looked like Julia was inside. This clue opened a new path. The police began tracking the van's movements. They found records showing that the vehicle belonged to a man named Brian, Mark's cousin, a distant relative who had been estranged from the family for years. Brian had a criminal history including accusations of kidnapping and child abuse, but had never been convicted. Brian's name shocked everyone. No one could believe he might be connected to Julia's disappearance. The family had barely spoken to him, and he was thought to live far away in a different state. But the evidence was clear. His van was near the house at the crucial time, and his background made him a strong suspect. Detective Mills and the police began searching for Brian's properties. One place stood out: a remote cabin deep in the woods, owned by Brian several years ago. It was abandoned now, but neighbors remembered seeing strange things around it. Some had seen a young girl near the cabin, but no one had reported it, thinking it was Brian's daughter or a visitor. The police obtained permission to search the cabin thoroughly. When they arrived, the place was dark and dusty. The windows were broken, the door creaked, and the air smelled old and damp. But inside, they found something surprising. There were signs that a child had been living there. Old drawings hung on the walls, childish pictures of houses, animals, and flowers. The floor was scattered with toys, clothes, and books. There were even growth charts nailed to the wall, showing how tall a child had been over the years. Detectives carefully collected everything, documenting every detail. Elena could hardly believe it. The cabin was a hidden world where Julia might have been trapped, hidden away from the family and the world. DNA tests on some of the items confirmed the most amazing thing. The child who lived there was Julia. This was proof that she had been alive after all those years. But where was she now? The cabin was empty. The news spread quickly. Julia was alive, but she had vanished again. The police issued a nationwide alert, sharing her photo and description. Everywhere, people were told to watch for a teenage girl matching Julia's age, who might be frightened and confused. Elena felt a storm of emotions. Relief, joy, fear, and hope battled inside her. Could Julia be found? Was she safe? Would she remember her family? How would she cope after years alone? Meanwhile, Detective Mills continued digging deeper. She uncovered more about Brian's past, a dark history of manipulation and violence. He had been arrested several times, but often escaped serious punishment because witnesses were scared or disappeared. The cabin search also revealed that Brian had died in a car crash 3 years earlier. This explained why Julia had left the cabin. She had been alone since then, surviving without any help. But surviving alone was dangerous and lonely. Julia must have faced many challenges, learning to hide and find food, living in fear. Detective Mills believed Julia was strong, but she needed help and protection. At the same time, Elena prepared for every possible outcome. She talked to psychologists and social workers, hoping to be ready if Julia was found. She kept her phone close, answering every call with hope and anxiety. The whole community held its breath. Julia's story had become one of survival and mystery, inspiring many and reminding everyone how fragile childhood can be. Elena spent her days waiting, hoping for a miracle. A knock on the door, a phone call, or a message that would bring her daughter back home. After the shocking discovery of the hidden crate and the abandoned cabin, everyone hoped that Julia might be found alive. The police continued their search with fresh energy, checking nearby towns, shelters, and hospitals. They asked the public for any information, sharing Julia's new age photo created through age progression technology. The hope that Julia was still out there, waiting to be found, grew stronger with each passing day. Elena's life became a waiting game filled with mixed emotions. Every sound made her heart jump. A doorbell, a phone ringing, a knock at the window. She kept looking out the window, hoping to see her daughter walking up the street. Sometimes she imagined Julia standing there, with wide eyes and a shy smile, just needing a safe place to come home. Elena's mind wandered back to the years Julia had spent alone. What had happened to her? How did she survive in the woods near the cabin after Brian died? Did she try to escape? Was she afraid? The questions were endless, and the answers hidden deep inside Elena's heart. The police believed that Julia had been hiding to protect herself from anyone who might want to hurt her. Detective Sarah Mills thought Julia was smart and strong, but also vulnerable. She feared that Julia might be scared to trust anyone, even her own family, after all those years of isolation. Meanwhile, social workers and psychologists began preparing to help Julia once she was found. They knew it would be hard for a child who had grown up alone to suddenly live with others. Julia would need love, patience, and understanding. She might be confused, angry, or scared. She might not remember everything clearly, but she would need to be safe and cared for. Elena spent hours every day preparing her home for Julia's return. She cleaned and fixed up Julia's old bedroom. She put fresh sheets on the bed, arranged Julia's favorite toys, and hung up pictures of the family. It was as if she was waiting for a miracle, a chance to hold her daughter again. One day, a call came to the police station. A woman in a nearby town had seen a young girl who looked like Julia. The girl was alone, quiet, and wearing clothes that looked old and worn. The police rushed to the location and found the girl exactly as described. When Elena got the news, her heart raced. She traveled quickly to the police station, her hands shaking with hope and fear. When she finally saw Julia, now a teenager, standing nervously in the room, the moment was filled with tears and hugs. Julia was weak, dirty, and scared, but she was alive. She had survived years alone, hidden from the world. She had no memory of her time with her family, only bits and pieces of her past. She was confused but safe. Elena held Julia tightly, promising never to let her go. Mark flew in from the state where he had been living. Seeing Julia again after so many years brought both joy and pain. Mark and Elena tried to support their daughter, but they also struggled to understand her new world. Julia had to relearn everything: how to trust people, how to live in a home, how to go to school. She was shy and quiet, but she showed signs of strength and intelligence. The therapists helped her express her feelings and memories, slowly unlocking the years of silence. During this time, police continued their investigation into Brian's crimes. They found evidence linking him to other children who had disappeared. It became clear that Brian was a dangerous man who had kidnapped multiple victims. Julia was lucky to have escaped or survived where others had not. The community came together to support Julia and her family. People donated clothes, books, and toys. Schools prepared to welcome Julia back. Everyone wanted to help her heal. Elena never stopped believing in her daughter. She knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she also knew that love could heal even the deepest wounds. Julia's return was a new beginning, a chance to build a future filled with hope. In the quiet moments, Elena often looked at the backyard where it all began. The place that had hidden the secret for so long was now a symbol of survival and strength. Julia's story reminded everyone that even in the darkest times, hope could shine through. Julia's return to her family was both beautiful and difficult. After 8 long years, Elena finally had her daughter back, but Julia was not the same little girl who had disappeared. She was now a teenager who had survived alone in the woods, hidden away from the world. The process of healing was slow, and the challenges were many. Julia was quiet and reserved at first. She didn't speak much and seemed afraid of new people and new places. She was overwhelmed by the noise and activity of the house. Things that were once familiar now felt strange. The walls, the furniture, even the voices of her parents sounded different to her. It was as if she had lived in 2 different worlds, and now had to learn how to live in one again. Elena and Mark did their best to be patient. They knew Julia needed time to adjust. They gave her space but stayed close enough to offer comfort. Sometimes Julia would sit by herself, staring out the window for hours. Other times she would suddenly break down in tears, missing the life she never had or the freedom she never knew. Therapists worked with Julia, helping her talk about her experiences. At first, she shared little, but slowly bits of her story began to come out. She told them about the cabin in the woods, the cold nights, the hunger, and the loneliness. She spoke of fear, fear of Brian, fear of being caught, fear of the unknown. She described how she learned to hide and survive on her own, using her small knowledge of nature to find food and water. Despite everything, Julia was incredibly brave. She had survived years alone, a feat that many adults would find impossible. Her strength inspired everyone around her. Elena often thought about how her little girl had become a fighter without even realizing it. School was a big challenge for Julia. She had missed many years of learning, and the world of classrooms, books, and classmates was foreign to her. Elena and Mark worked hard to help Julia catch up. Teachers were patient and kind, giving her extra time and support. Julia was shy at first, but slowly began to make friends. The school counselors helped her build confidence and taught her how to trust others. Julia's relationship with her parents was complicated but growing stronger every day. Elena and Mark were learning how to be parents again, understanding their daughter's new needs and fears. They celebrated small victories, a smile, a hug, a shared meal. They knew the journey would be long, but they were committed to walking it together. Community support was also important. People in the neighborhood organized events to welcome Julia back. They donated clothes, books, and toys. Local businesses offered jobs and internships to help her gain independence. The town became a place of hope, showing that even in tragedy, kindness and love could make a difference. The police continued to investigate Brian's crimes. New evidence showed that Julia was just one of many children he had hurt. His capture had brought relief but also sadness for the victims who were never found. Julia's story helped raise awareness about child safety and the importance of vigilance in communities. Elena often reflected on the past years, the pain, the waiting, the despair. But she also thought about the future, filled with hope and love. She dreamed of a life where Julia could grow up safe and happy, surrounded by people who cared. Julia, too, began to dream. She wanted to travel, to learn new things, and to build a life beyond the shadows of her past. She joined clubs, tried new hobbies, and slowly found joy in everyday moments. The backyard, once a place of mystery and loss, became a garden of healing. Elena planted flowers and trees there, creating a space of peace and beauty. Julia helped tend the garden, finding comfort in nature and growth. Their story touched many hearts, reminding everyone of the power of hope, resilience, and love. Julia's journey was a testament to the human spirit's ability to overcome darkness and find light. As the years passed, Julia grew stronger, her past becoming part of her but not defining her. She became a voice for children who had suffered, speaking out to protect others and bring justice. Her family stood beside her, proud and united. Though the scars of the past remained, Julia's future was bright. The little girl who disappeared while playing in the backyard had returned, not just alive but ready to live fully. Her story was one of survival, love, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child.